Back with another tier list video. This time it's Ilia Topuria versus featherweight and lightweight legends and GOAT. So champions and non-champions that are legends of featherweight and lightweight. I think this should be a pretty interesting one today, maybe a bit of a contentious one. But of course, it is just my opinion, lads. And I've shot it in one take with no research. So bearing that in mind before you ridicule me and destroy me in the comments. All right, people. This was recommended to me by Azad. Thank you very much, Azad. It was a really good video suggestion. He did include just lightweights, but I thought because Ilia's competed in both divisions, it'd be interesting to mention both. Without further ado, let's get to the categories. For those of you that haven't seen this video before, beats Ilia basically means I think they beat Ilia. I would wager his opponent's chances of beating him much higher than I would Ilia's chances of beating them. High chance means I pretty much view it as 50-50 or a 55% chance Ilia wins to a 45% chance his opponent wins, but very, very high chance that they have a lot of success and can potentially beat Ilia. Can compete means they can give Ilia some trouble, maybe early on, maybe nick a round off him or two, but ultimately I don't see them beating Ilia. Pray for that man means, dear Lord, they do not have a chance going into this fight. So without further ado, Islam Makhachev, very similar. Look, for those of you that saw my Ilia Topuria versus current lightweights video the other day, Islam Makhachev's going to go in high chance. Right now, currently, this fight is possible. He is Ilia Topuria's biggest threat. He did just vacate the lightweight title after a very long winning streak at lightweight. The greatest lightweight of all time. I don't think that's a hot take. Khabib, who is in this video, is the second for me. But the greatest lightweight of all time, ridiculously well-rounded, elite-level chain wrestling. It'd be interesting to see how Ilia deals with that. It's always interesting to see how people deal with it, yet none of them seem to be able to at some point. Even if they hold him off for a bit, he's relentless with it. You're not going to discourage him if you stuff his takedowns. He has the fight IQ to keep shooting on you, mixing it up with you on the feet. His striking is ever improving. He's a southpaw, which can give Ilia trouble. He's bigger than Ilia. He's going to be putting size on to get to welterweight too. If he mops JDM, he's going to go up there. If he mops JDM, a well-rounded, bigger boxer than Ilia Topuria, doesn't have the. It's not the same as Ilia Topuria, but you get where I'm going with it. I think I'd put him up there. If he loses to JDM and gets sent back down to lightweight after being KO'd and losing momentum, I might even put him. I wouldn't put him in can compete, but I'd confidently say he doesn't beat Ilia Topuria in that sense. So I'm going to put it in high chance as a 50-50 fight because you just don't know. We're going to have to see how Islam Makhachev's career plays out at welterweight before I definitely say this or I definitely say Ilia beats him. So I'm going to put it in 50-50. I think that is a genuine 50-50 fight. And I went over more technical reasons in the other Ilia Topuria video if you want to go check that out after watching this one. So Chad Mendes, he's going to go in can compete. Prime Chad Mendes, and I've included him in this video. He didn't win a UFC world title, but definitely one of my favourite featherweight fighters back in the day. Gave Alexander Volkanovski a war, gave Conor McGregor a really hard fight on short notice and just kind of ran out of steam in that fight. Obviously, Conor wasn't preparing for a wrestler, so there is that too. But still, regardless, gave Conor McGregor a really, really hard fight. Gave Jose Aldo a war. He's kind of the guy that gives the champions really hard fights historically, but doesn't quite have what it takes to get over the line. And it's the same with Ilia Topuria for me. But here's what Chad Mendes is really good at. And here's why I'd put him in can compete instead of pray for that man. On the feet, yeah, it is pray for that man. But the fact of the matter is this. Mendes was so athletic in his prime. Oh God, he was so athletic. He was a ridiculously fast covering distance wrestler. His power was ridiculous. He's like a more versatile Josh Emmett, right? He was a younger, probably not quite as powerful, but still ridiculous power. Faster, more athletic Josh Emmett with better wrestling. His double legs were powerful. His takedowns were powerful. Strong in the clinch. Mendes could, for sure, give Ilia Topuria trouble early. Maybe even take him down at some point if he keeps shooting in on him. And can land on Ilia Topuria. The difference, though, is fight IQ. And for me, in the exchanges on the feet, eventually Mendes is 100% going down. If you look at his fighting style, if he fights too patient, Ilia will just back him up with his jabs, force panic shoots out of Mendes, and he'll take over the fight. Mendes' only path to victory would be to try and make this fight a little bit scruffy, you know, blitz at Ilia from distance, wide distances, and really try and disrupt his timing, constant takedown attempts or level change fakes. He can give Ilia trouble, for sure, but I do not put him up there with Islam Makhachev, for example, and say that he could beat Ilia Topuria. Because I think his chain wrestling isn't good enough to get the better of Ilia there anyway, although his initial shot is powerful and strong. And like I said, he's very athletic, and he's a very good wrestler, but he don't have that chain wrestling that someone like Islam Makhachev has, that would favour getting the better of Ilia Topuria in a lot of scenarios. I don't think he gets Ilia Topuria to the ground much. If he does, it won't be easy, and I don't think he can keep him there. And on the feet, a couple of, maybe the first and second round, Mendes will give Ilia a lot of trouble because he's just going to constantly be blitzing in, and it might be hard for Ilia to time. But eventually, Ilia's going to catch him, I think. 9 times out of 10, Ilia would beat Chad Mendes, and I think that's generous. But I definitely wouldn't put Mendes in prayer for that man, as in he has nothing for Ilia, because I definitely don't think that's true. Mendes, for me, very underrated. Eddie Alvarez. Now, I think people, a lot of this time, some people might not even know why I've included Alvarez. First of all, he was a lightweight champion, Bellator champion, very good fighter. Like the Underground King, won a lot of regional titles. He deserves more respect for his career, Eddie Alvarez, and that's why I've included him in here, because I do think he is a legend of lightweight. A very, very good fighter, a dog, Eddie Alvarez. Decent kicks, decent boxing, decent wrestling. Decently well-rounded, right? That's not enough. That's not enough to compete with Ilia Topuria. Ilia is too powerful for someone like Alvarez. Alvarez always had great recovery. Go look at the Justin Gaethje fight, or even the Dustin Poirier fight. He can weather the storm and just give you a little bit of trouble to hang in there. But then you go look at the Conor McGregor fight, and Conor, I would argue, this might be a hot take, is more precise than Ilia in terms of just finding that one big shot, whereas Ilia puts together rapid combinations with precision, but just not as quite as precise as Conor with one punch. I just think his chin, it's not like he had an unreal chin. He could easily be sat down by most people, easily wobbled by most people, and he could be finished. He deserves respect, and that's why I've put him in this list. I'm not trying to shit on him. Any legend you hear me mention today, it's nothing personal, right? Fantastic careers, a lot of them. But he has to go in prayer for that man. It's nothing personal. It's just that, and he won't care anyway. He's not going to see this, is he? I doubt Eddie Alvarez scours the internet for Ben J MMA videos. Who does scour the internet for Ben J MMA videos? I wonder. But anyway, I digress. I would put Eddie Alvarez in prayer for that man. I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's a pretty good take, to be honest with you. Not to toot my own horn, but at the same time, to toot my own horn. Max Holloway. Prime Max Holloway. Right, here is my hot take. I think Ilia did beat a prime Max Holloway. Now, that might sound very, very weird to some of you lot. Very, very weird it might sound to some of you lot to say that. But I don't think Max Holloway was out of his prime when he lost to Ilia. He's coming off one of his best ever career performances. Yes, he's been around for a very long time. And yes, he might severely decline after this loss to Ilia, in my opinion, because he's never been knocked out before. Someone who relies on the chin as much as Max Holloway does. Usually it doesn't end well for him. Look at historically, Chuck Liddell, guys like that. Once they go down and they get those lights shut off, that can be the start of a very severe decline. But that's all speculation. It's all speculation. There are different versions of Holloway. It's very hard to say whether Holloway was in his prime when Ilia beat him. For me, I think he was. Age-wise, he certainly was. But Holloway's been around for a very long time. This version I've got up of Holloway here was more of a volume momentum fighter that picks up rhythm as the fight goes on. The Holloway that fought Ilia, I would argue, focuses more on trying to get you out of there and sticking and moving, if that kind of makes sense. It's not that different to how he's always fought, but at the same time, the goal and the way he builds momentum in fights is different, and it's changed over the course of his career. And I also think, honestly, I wouldn't put him in high chance because he doesn't have any grappling. Ilia can take it there with him if he is really struggling, and he did show Max that in that fight, just to kind of say to Max, don't get too comfortable, because I have this. If you're gonna be, if Max is gonna get the better of you, he has this in his locker for him. And Ilia did remind Max with that at the end of the first round. So he has that in his locker. It's just really hard to say, and I kind of sound like a broken record. I don't want to spend too much time on it, whether Max was in his prime when Ilia beat him. But honestly, Max is too hittable. And I honestly think Ilia could sleep any version of Max eventually. Like, Max took a lot of shots off Ilia. It wasn't like Ilia hit him once and Max was just washed. Hits him once in the first round and he drops. No, Ilia connected on Max a lot of times. So it's not going to be a quick thing. It might end in the 4th. It might end in the 5th. But he's going to get him eventually. But Holloway, like in the first fight, this will be the rematch. He did lead the fight. He was up on the scorecard. So for sure, that shows he can compete with Ilia. He can give Ilia a really hard fight. He did land a few decent combinations on Ilia too. And that oblique kick he was landing when Ilia was looking for the jab to the body was really good from Max Holloway too. He just kind of went away from it. But no, I don't see him beating Ilia Topuria at any stage of his career. That might be a hot take. I don't know. I do think Ilia beat a prime Holloway. But was it a different version of how Holloway fights? Yes. Yes, it was. But Charles Oliveira, let me know in the comments what you think of that one. Prime Charles Oliveira. So this was Charles Oliveira that beat Tony Ferguson and then beat Michael Chandler. Again, the one Ilia beat is not a washed, out of his prime shot Oliveira. But it isn't age-wise. It isn't Oliveira at his highest trajectory, right? He's lost to Islam. He's lost to Arman. Arman was a close fight. Islam was competitive, but he got finished in the second round. Charles Oliveira has dangerous jiu-jitsu, as shown in the Ilia Topuria fight. Like, he can go from being in a crucifix to attacking a heel hook somehow. Not saying it was close, but he's a wizard off his back. And again, when he's sat there trying to welcome Ilia back, it is like Ilia Topuria looked at it and thought, I could out-grapple you, but I'm going to get you back on the feet because that's where it's safer. Oliveira's dangerous. He's dangerous with his knees up the middle. He landed a really good short right elbow. I missed it watching it live because it was really quick. When Ilia Topuria looked to detonate a right hook, and Oliveira timed a really good short right elbow, which shows the durability of Ilia. Ilia is ultimately, though, a lot better of a striker than Charles Oliveira, and any version of Oliveira that fights Ilia Topuria, I just can't see beating him. I'm not going to put him in prayer for that man, especially not a slightly younger Charles who just beat Michael Chandler on top of his game. I'm going to put him above Chad Mendes. Can compete, yeah, for sure, can compete. Maybe if he was a little bit younger, his reaction time would be a little bit better, but he's always been hittable. He's always fought with that same marauding style. Not to be Joe Rogan, but marauding style. Marauder comes forward, tight guard, teeps, front kicks, very dangerous jiu-jitsu, but ultimately, man, Ilia's style for Charles is just a nightmare. I'm actually going to put him below Mendes. Ilia's style for me against Charles, whether he beat a prime Charles or not, I'm not too sure. You can debate that in the comments. But his style for Charles is a nightmare, in my opinion. I actually don't think that's a hot take. I think that's a solid take from it. To be honest with you, I think that's bang on. Nate Diaz. Pray for that man. Well, let me explain why I've included Nate Diaz, if I can stop stuttering for 1 second. Now, Nate Diaz, for me, obviously is a big star among the casual fans. And he's a big fan favourite. That's why I've included him, right? Nate Diaz, I don't even know if he is a legend, or he's definitely not one of the GOATs, and he didn't win a world title or anything like that. But I just thought I'd include him because he's a big name, all right, people. And I feel like if I didn't include him, I feel like some people would be like, oh, why didn't you include Nate Diaz? But just to quickly kind of get this one over and done with, Ilia Topuria would smash Nate Diaz to pieces. Absolutely batter and brutalise Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz has no chance against Ilia Topuria, virtually. He's long and tall, and he has good jiu-jitsu. His jiu-jitsu is very overrated, though. Very overrated. It worked on Conor McGregor, and it's worked on, like, Anthony Pettis and stuff like that. It's very good. Ain't on the level of Ilia, I don't think. It's not on that elite bracket. Very good jiu-jitsu, much slower than Ilia. His body's going to be there for Ilia to target. He's got a granite chin and great recovery, so I think Ilia would find it really hard to sleep Nate Diaz. But honest to God, I think he could. I think he'd TKO Nate Diaz, and that might sound wild. How can... Or he'd get like 10-7 rounds the same way he did with Josh Emmett. But I think he actually would get Nate Diaz out of there. Honest to God, I really do. Is that a hot take? Nate Diaz was a pretty good fighter, but I honestly never felt he was on that top tier bracket. I think if you look at the context of the McGregor fights, it was just that McGregor hadn't adjusted to welterweight for me. If you actually look at when McGregor was fresh, he was just so superior to Nate Diaz on the feet. It was unreal. Ilia's different to Conor, but Nate Diaz got outclassed so many times in his career. Like Rory McDonald. When he tried to step up against these guys in level, he got outclassed most of the time. But he is a big star, and I thought that's why I'd include him. I'm not trying to shit... It sounds like I'm trying to shit on Nate Diaz. I don't mind Nate Diaz. I would say I'm a fan of him, but I just think... Yeah, I thought I'd include him just because I thought it'd be interesting, but I'm not trying to shit on him. I just think Ilia's a terrible fight for him. And then when it comes to Khabib, now this is where it gets interesting. Not easy. High chance. Right. Here's why I'm putting him... I'm tempted... Do I do that? Right. Here, I'm going to put him in high chance. Here's my explanation. Khabib was a fantastic fighter. Khabib is, joint with Ilia Topuria, funnily enough, I think the best fighter, I'm going to put him above Islam, the best fighter I've ever seen. Honest to God, the best fighter I have ever seen. The most effective fighter I have ever seen, without a doubt. You knew what was coming, and you couldn't stop it anyway. With Khabib, after he retired, or after he beat Gaethje, I thought to myself, I would never pick Khabib to lose a fight against anyone ever again, right? Because it was that good. Every single time he fought somebody, it was like, well, Gaethje's got D1 level wrestling, and Gaethje's got great leg kicks, and he's great in the exchanges, and this was a prime Justin Gaethje coming off his best career performance against Tony Ferguson. Khabib easily beat him. Easily. And then exposed a massive hole in Gaethje's game, which was his jiu-jitsu at the time. It was insane what Khabib did to Gaethje. Poirier's got great jiu-jitsu, a black belt, and he's a great combination puncher, and he was an interim champion coming off beating a current active world champion, Max Holloway. A prime Max Holloway. That was a prime peak Dustin Poirier. Khabib dominated him. Conor McGregor, all right, the whiskey and the drinking and the press conferences, people do mention that, but in age, and he was at the height of his hype, and he technically was the lineal champion at that point. He by no means looked washed against Khabib. It was just that Khabib was too much for him, and Khabib dominated him. RDA, in his prime, Khabib dominated him. The thing is, I honestly think Khabib would out-grapple Islam Makhachev in an MMA fight. Probably, right? He's the type of guy to do that, and I think even Islam would admit it himself. His grappling was, honestly, borderline unstoppable. Borderline unstoppable. That's what it felt like watching him. He was much bigger than Ilia Topuria, by the way. That's what, much bigger than Ilia Topuria. Much bigger. Bigger than even Islam Makhachev in weight. Struggled massively to make lightweight, but he'd show up on the night and you'd see that strength, you'd see that size of him. It was just, honestly, it would be really hard for Ilia to beat Khabib. But on the feet, you look at how good Islam Makhachev is with his kicks and distance management. Khabib is not on that level. Khabib's striking was very unevolved. It was getting better by the Gaethje fight, but he's open to calf kicks. That's not a massive thing Ilia would go for. But Ilia's jab, I think, would break Khabib's pressure. Khabib would get guys swinging wildly to try and break his pressure off them. But with Ilia Topuria, he's so confident in his grappling. I think even if he couldn't out-grapple Khabib, technically, I think that's a massive edge over Khabib. Khabib won fights, I think, a lot of the time, not just because of how good he was, but through his fear. Through the fear of how good his wrestling was, right? Go look at how Dustin Poirier fought Khabib. He fought him so wild. He was so wild. So wild. Michael Johnson, he's always been wild, but against top-level opposition, he'd always be a lot more composed and switched on. But against Khabib, he's so wild, trying to swing for the fences, trying to break his pressure. Same with Gaethje, swinging leg kicks to try and knock Khabib off balance, to try and break his pressure. Conor McGregor's the only one that never really lost confidence and tried to stay technical on the feet. But even in the second round, when Khabib landed that big right overhand, it wasn't technically good. And that's something that, if Eddie Alvarez went for that right overhand, Conor would have seen it coming and Eddie Alvarez would have been on his back. But the pressure and the mental pressure and the exhaustion it gave guys, when is Khabib going to shoot, made them so much worse on the feet. But with someone like Ilia, I think the fundamentals of boxing are built into him. And I think that'd give Khabib a real hard fight. Not just that, he one-punch knockout power. And he can deliver it in combinations, not just one punch like Conor McGregor could. And he has an elite-level Greco-Roman wrestling base, pardon me, if I can stop stuttering. Great jiu-jitsu. Just look at how he grappled with Charles Oliveira. When he wanted to do it with Bryce Mitchell, not trying to compare Bryce Mitchell with Khabib, but when he wanted to do it with Bryce Mitchell and decided, actually, you know what, you're going to keep shooting in on me, I'm just going to go there with you and easily submit you, it was easy for him. It was actually really easy for him. Once he decided to stop trying to stop Bryce Mitchell and just go there with him, he fucking mopped him. Effortlessly. Effortlessly, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to put... I don't know. I can't spend too much time on this because I've been on about it for minutes. That's really tough for me because of Khabib's size. But, like, Islam's a far better striker than Khabib. He's a southpaw. He hits harder. Khabib was much more of a volume striker. But, man, it's hard for me to say with the amount of weaknesses on the feet for Khabib. He would definitely beat Ilia. But it's very tough. I'm close to doing that. So I'm going to put him slightly above Islam. Maybe it's nostalgia, right? Maybe Khabib wasn't actually as good as Islam. But honest to God, it wouldn't surprise me if Khabib easily out-grappled Ilia, to be honest with you. Because how many times did we see that throughout his career? It's different to Ilia. The fighters he faced were different to Ilia. But how many times? How many times? Conor McGregor. Dear Lord. Conor McGregor. Right. This is really, really tough. Prime Conor McGregor. I'm going to put prime Conor McGregor in high chance. Now, I know, people are going to rush to the comments and call me a casual. I know Ilia has the takedown threat against Conor, and I'm putting him below Islam and Khabib because of that. But his actual striking at featherweight Conor, or the Conor that beat Eddie Alvarez, is a very, very, very big problem for Ilia Topuria. Side kicks to the body and to the knee. Spinning kicks to kind of intercept Ilia's swaying movement, so it might put Ilia off slipping, and then he can line up the straight left hand. Ilia's a better combination boxer, but Conor McGregor, just setting up that one straight left hand, and his 1-2s were elite, or his lead right uppercut into a left hand was elite, and so was his slipping. Ilia would struggle to get his jab going against Conor. Conor always did better against orthodox fighters than he did southpaws. Ilia's a lot shorter, Conor's a lot longer. Conor, on the feet, really has a nightmare style for Ilia. And I know people aren't going to agree with that. But here's the thing. He's going to gas out. Right? I know people like to say, like, oh, but Conor only ever gassed out against Nate Diaz and da-da-da-da-da because of the exercise. But whenever we saw Conor go past 2 rounds, he always faded. Right? We can't just speculate and say at featherweight it would have been any different. The only time we saw it was against Holloway, but at the highest level, he always faded in the later rounds. Against Khabib, faded. Completely faded in the 4th round. Gone. He was gone. He just let Khabib get that neck crank, it felt like, in that 4th round. So that's a big, big factor. The takedown threat of Ilia. I would edge Ilia to beat Conor, but for sure, prime Conor has a high chance of making something happen in that fight for me. I don't know whether that's a hot take. I really believe that's a pretty interesting fight on the feet. People underrate Conor. I get it. What he's turned into, I get it. I understand. I understand you might not like him as a person, but just take that out of it. As a fighter, in his prime, fantastic. And could you imagine the press conferences between these two? Ilia would just be copying off Conor. No, the press conferences between these two would be elite. The mind games would be elite. Both of them very confident fighters. So Conor McGregor on his run, there's not going to be a guy Ilia can mentally break. It's interesting, that one. I put him in high chance. RDA, pray for that man. And look, we all love RDA. RDA is a little bit overrated for me in the sense that people act like he was an unstoppable god in his prime. You know, Eddie Alvarez slept him. And, you know, not trying to shit on RDA, but that's what he did. RDA was a very well-rounded fighter. Always struggled against elite-level grapplers in his career. Khabib or at welterweight. The welterweights were a bit too big for him. Maybe that's a bit unfair for me to say. But Ilia, I think, could out-grapple RDA. And on the feet, man, RDA gets slept. What's RDA going to do to him on the feet? I really... Defensively, RDA would not cope with Ilia Topuria. So I think prayer for that man is... I think prayer for that man is justified. Tony Ferguson, pray for that man. Now, I know what's going to happen here. Because I know people really, really rate prime Tony Ferguson. Go watch it back. Now, he had an incredible, I think it was a 12-fight winning streak. But, full mounted by Kevin Lee on short notice. And really, Kevin Lee lost that fight because of staph infection. I think Tony Ferguson could easily beat a Kevin Lee without staph infection, but staph infection really cost Kevin Lee that fight. He was in too much of a rush to get Tony out of there early. Full mounted by Kevin Lee. His grappling is very overrated. Very dangerous off his back, very active off his back. Let me put this into perspective. Him and Khabib would not have been close, in my opinion. No way. He might have been the only guy to cut Khabib, maybe with elbows off his back. But he would have got easily beat by Khabib, in my opinion. He's way, way too hittable on the feet. And he had a great chin and great recovery. And actually, those short elbows, if he can get Ilia in the clinch, and Ilia's looking to unload with combinations, mate, that's a problem. I think Tony could maybe cut him. So if you want to put him in compete, I don't mind. But, honestly, Ilia would fucking... I really think Ilia would badly hurt Tony Ferguson, in his prime or not. Very aggressive Tony, fearless. But maybe I could put him in can compete at the bottom end. Maybe I could. Because I think maybe he could cut Ilia. Or maybe he could start well. But I honestly think it'd be like Charles. It'd be a first round finish, but maybe Tony had some success in the first. Is prayer for that man harsh? I've got to go with my honest opinion. My honest opinion is I think Ilia beat prime Tony. So maybe I'm going to get cooked for saying that. But I honestly don't see Tony winning at all. I don't see Tony winning at all, to be honest with you. But if you want to put him in can compete, I think that's fair. Prime Frankie Edgar. Pray for that man. Pray for that man. Slightly below RDA. Now, Edgar was very undersized, and Ilia's not necessarily the biggest guy in height or reach, but Edgar, in my opinion, deserves a lot of credit for how well he did in his career, because he really, really fought much bigger people than him through most of his career. But he was probably one of the first ever well-rounded featherweights and lightweights, in my opinion. Or one of like the good boxing, great wrestling, great jiu-jitsu. Like he was all around pretty good for his time. Also very fast. But, mate, I don't see him beating Ilia at all. He's got that American-style wrestling. Chain wrestling would let him down against Ilia. Not very strong either. It's not like he's bigger than Ilia. And ultimately, I really think Ilia would sleep him in like 1 or 2 punches. Now, don't get me wrong. Edgar was tough. Tough as nails. Really did well to say he was undersized against lightweights and featherweights during his career. But I really think Ilia would quite badly hurt Frankie Edgar. And I'm not trying to shit on him. He's a legend of the game. Very underrated as a legend. But stylistically, Ilia's just a nightmare for him, to be honest with you. BJ Penn. This is where it gets even worse. Because now I've included, right, I've not included Sean Shirk and I've not included, you know, Jens Pulver, because I feel like it is just disrespectful. The way I would break down that fight is very disrespectful to Pulver or Sean Shirk. And I feel like we all know those guys were nowhere near as evolved as modern day mixed martial artists, to be honest with you. BJ Penn is the same. Pray for that man. Now, prime BJ Penn gave GSP a decent fight before GSP was really at his peak. BJ Penn went up and fought Mark. In fact, I'm going to put BJ Penn higher. Very well rounded. Probably BJ Penn, many people would argue, was one of the first pioneers for being well rounded in terms of having great grappling and decent boxing again for its time. A legend of the game, BJ Penn. But I really think people over-reg how good BJ Penn was in terms of how well he would do against modern lightweights. Like, I saw Joe Rogan saying he thinks BJ Penn could beat Khabib. No. No way. Khabib would have smashed BJ Penn to pieces. BJ Penn had never fought a fighter with it like Khabib. And it's the same with Ilia. BJ Penn is nowhere near evolved enough to deal with Ilia Topuria's great grappling, great striking, his great distance management and his boxing combinations. It's just the older generation. It's the progression of the sport, right? It'd be worrying if BJ Penn is likely to beat Ilia Topuria. It'd be worrying because that'd show a real slow progression of the sport. But the sport keeps growing so fast that I just can't. I'm going to put BJ Penn back low. Honestly, I don't see BJ Penn doing it at all, to be honest with you. Dustin Poirier, that's interesting. God, this video's been long. Sorry, guys. This is in one take. Prime Dustin, I mentioned it the other day. I'm going to put him at the top of can compete. For sure, Prime Dustin can compete with Ilia Topuria. Good boxing combinations, tough as nails. Power Ilia would absolutely have to respect. Ilia can get careless in the pocket at times, and that would be a problem. Poirier's pretty good jiu-jitsu off his back, so I don't think Ilia would submit him, but Ilia could out-grapple him. Again, it's similar to Holloway. If Ilia needs it, it would be there for him, and he would take Dustin down just to say, hey, I have this here, don't forget about it. Don't get careless. Just to kind of gain Dustin's respect on the feet. But people don't realise Ilia is superior as a combination puncher than Dustin. His placement, his weight distribution, his body shots. Dustin throws arm punches most of the time compared to someone like Ilia who cinches on his combinations. And as much as Dustin could have success early, maybe stuff a couple of Ilia's takedowns or maybe even work well off his back to get to his feet, he would lose the majority of the exchanges. I think he could take a couple of Ilia's shots too, but eventually he's going to go, in my opinion. So I think he can compete with Ilia, even in his prime. Maybe I'd edge it more so if it was a prime Dustin who just beat Max Holloway. But I'm going to drop him lower because I don't think he has as good as a chance as a prime Conor or a prime Islam or a prime Khabib. I can't put him up there with them. But him and Max Holloway I would edge way above Mendes and Oliveira, but they're in the same category, if that kind of makes sense. Just to kind of put it in perspective. Volk. Right. Oh, God, I feel like I'm going to get fried for this video. I don't know. It's just my opinion. Can compete. I know. I don't like the narrative. I mean, I don't like the narrative that the only reason Ilia beat Volk was because Volk was coming off a knockout loss on short notice to Islam Makhachev. Look what Volk just did to Diego Lopez, right? A timeless fighter, extremely well-rounded, elite level 5-round cardio, was up against Ilia in their fight, right? So you could be like, well, if it was a more prime Volk, wouldn't it be worse? No. Volk never had a granite chin, ever in his career. Never had a granite chin. Could be hurt. Not easy to get rid of, not easy to submit. Ilia definitely would struggle to out-grapple someone like Volk. Volk would struggle to out-grapple someone like Ilia. I feel like Volk would go... If he could rematch Ilia now, or if you could ask Volk honestly, would you attempt more wrestling if you fought Ilia now? I think he'd say yes. But Volk has always had that tendency to lean back and pull out a distance. He's always had that tendency. But the problem is, Ilia Topuria's boxing, for me, is just a nightmare for any version of Volk to deal with. He has a great lead low kick, and I think he'd mix in the round kicks to the body just to give Ilia Topuria more things to worry about. But maybe he was a little bit off his game after the Islam Makhachev fight. But I don't think any version of Volk would have taken that left hand. Right? I really don't. I've never subscribed to that opinion. That might be a hot take, but Volk's a legend, right? Could Volk beat a prime Conor? Yes. Could Volk beat a prime Islam? Yes. Could Volk compete with a prime Khabib? Quite possibly, right? He could. But against Ilia's style for Volk is just a nightmare. I really believe that. And that's no disrespect to Volk. He's still at the top end of can compete because he absolutely can. But I just think most times he's going to get caught. Eventually, even if he's up. I just think he does. Prime Aldo. Ooh. So this is an Aldo with elite level takedown defense. Ilia would struggle with that. Not big. Like, you think about it, Aldo really could have made the switch to 135 sooner because the featherweights, Conor, Max, ended up outgrowing him. I mean, even Volk in stature, in natural weight, ended up outgrowing him. Not a big featherweight. For his time, in his prime, a lot of those featherweights were true featherweights and they were his size. But then they outgrew him and he had to move to bantamweight because it was getting too much for him. Still extremely fast. Impeccable takedown defense. It'd still hold up against Ilia, I have no doubt. Great jiu-jitsu. Elite level leg kicks, that's a problem for Ilia. It wouldn't be calf kicks, right? Because we've got to look at the time Aldo was around. It wouldn't be calf kicks. It would be leg kicks that Aldo would primarily be focusing on. It would be leg kicks. Not calf kicks, sorry. It'd be low kicks to the thigh, pardon me. So I don't think he'd stop Ilia with them, or I don't think it'd affect the fight too much, unless he just keeps landing them consistently. And I think Aldo would really struggle to find the distance to land them, because Ilia would keep peppering him with the jab to the body and the jab to the head. Aldo would use his Muay Thai guard. Aldo actually has decent slips, but not impeccable. He has decent head movement, but it's not impeccable. And when you hit Aldo, he gets very careless and reactive and tries to get you back instantly to try and pull the round back. And he did that with Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor landed a side kick to the body. Aldo was no doubt riled up from all the trash talk, but he went and lunged at Conor and he got caught. Max Holloway stopped him at featherweight. Volk stopped him. He's going to get stopped, but I am going to put him below Max Holloway. I don't know. That could be a hot take, but again, Aldo just got outgrew by a lot of the featherweights in stature. It's not all about height and length. It's about weight and density. A lot of these featherweights outgrew him. So I just think prime Aldo would still lose to Ilia. But there is some success and a lot of success I see him having in that fight regardless. So anyway, lads, we've yapped on here. I know some of my explanations were a bit long-winded. I do apologise. Thank you all very much for watching. And let me know what you think of this tier list in the comments. Goodbye, everybody.